Hello, everybody. All right. Let all this synchronize here. Welcome, welcome. I'm earlier than I announced here because I'm going to spend a couple minutes getting everything properly synchronized before I get into the topic at hand. Okay. I'm going to spend a couple minutes. Sorry about that. All right. Get my chat windows ready here. I technically announced it would be a few minutes from now, so that'll give some folks some time to join who are planning on it being in a few minutes. And then I can get all my chat windows going here. Yeah, so it's been some interesting news lately. I'm starting to lose track of things here as far as, what's the... I start to research something pretty in depth, and then it just seems like it's on to the next thing already that is requires all that attention. Here it is. Okay. All right. Getting my chat windows going here, folks. So thanks for your patience. Yeah. We'll get through it, everybody. It's going to be okay. We are. It's just getting weirder and weirder. So I think it makes me feel compelled to comment less and less lately. As much, I still have an intuition to do it, but a lot of strange things have been going on when, there's times where I'm just thinking something's going to happen, or somebody close to me is just thinking something's going to happen, or we make one, simple offhand like remark out of the top of our heads, and then suddenly an event that matches exactly what we said prior to us knowing about it happens. And this just keeps happening over and over again in ways that are involving like some pretty significant events globally, where it's like, news that's relevant all over the place. And you wouldn't know it unless you were here witnessing it. So I'm not going to suggest that try to draw a lot of attention to it per se. But yeah, it's to the point now where I'm realizing that these synchronicities that I'm finding, and as weird as my topic may seem tonight, I thought it was an important topic to cover because I think some people have provided some pretty seriously compelling comparison evidences of timelines relative to Castro and Justin Trudeau. So there's people that have speculated that Fidel Castro is the true father of Canadian, PM. They have PMs, right? Not presidents. What is Trudeau? I'm sorry, guys. I'm bad right now. But anyways, whatever Trudeau is, president, PM, whatever. The point would be that, as the head of Canada right now, a lot of people have speculated that Trudeau looks a whole hell of a lot like Fidel Castro. And a lot of times I hear these statements, and I kind of go, oh, okay, whatever, even though it is pretty relevant to things that I discuss. So if anybody's ever mentioned that to me as a more compelling thing that I needed to research and I started to fluff it off, then please forgive me. That's kind of the way my brain works. But I do usually remember that somebody tried to call my attention to something like that, even if I don't always recall who it was. And so this is just a validation. If there is anybody out there that we're saying like, hey, do you remember this whole thing about, Trudeau looking a lot like Fidel Castro? Maybe you should pay more attention to it. This got me to look like more at the article. And then I kind of said, oh, wow, yeah. And it was weird how that caught my attention precisely at the same time as I was reviewing the television series Soap. And I'm going to show you what that is, those unfamiliar. So I'm going to be referencing tonight as a core part of my material here, a couple of articles here. All right, so it says, of course, Fidel Castro is Justin Trudeau's dad. Nobody has debunked anything. And so I guess there's a lot of people that made the claim that it was the case, and then a whole bunch of others did their whole, well, I looked on Snopes and I found out that wasn't true, which is kind of the common thing now, even though we all know Snopes is about as Snopes is about as good of a source as Wikipedia, folks. It's just that, you got to start somewhere, right? I don't know. What do we do, right? It's a little bit like you have to access news and articles and whatever as a common narrative that's being, delivered to us someplace. And so it's fair to start with those places, even if a lot of what's on there isn't, doesn't really pass muster. So I was watching Soap, and the plot line revolves around, look, if you've never seen it and it bothers you to hear spoilers or whatever, then don't listen to me. But there's a series that aired in America. Those unfamiliar, this is it. And you might remember this. It was pretty popular in reruns for years when I was a kid. And, I'm old enough to have, I was alive when it originally aired on television. And it was one of the earliest things I can remember seeing on a regular basis, watching it with my family, even though it probably was way beyond my years as far as its sophistication and humor. It really wasn't for children, but, again, it was safe enough for television. But, yeah, my brain probably wasn't processing more sophisticated, more controversial jokes because I was just a little kid. I was, about 3 when the series started, and then it finished when I was, I was 7 years old. It was on for about 4 years or whatever. And then I remember it being on in reruns pretty frequently. And that it was a series basically that pretty much every home that I lived in, I had watched the Soap reruns at one time or another. So I had a pretty good, memory of it. And I just remember the characters basically in that. Soap's an interesting universe. It kind of spins off into a whole bunch of other universes within TV sitcoms. There's a lot of spin-off series where there was common actors, actresses, and writers and producers. And, I think that what you'll find is the deeper you go into this series of materials where Soap is the core of it, you'll find that it expands into other areas that are also probably timeline relevant, is my guess. I haven't gone that deep. But Soap, I've pretty much almost nearly gotten through to the end here. I'm still waiting to watch the last couple of them. Episodes, that is. And but there's a lot of plot lines that revolve around the main character, Jessica Tate, and she's played by Katherine Hellman. She's in the bottom left corner there, if you notice there on the screen. She's Jessica Tate. And so it was a little bit funny to me that, the series revolves around 2 sisters, and then one kind of goes into affluence and has a mansion. And, they're the Tate Mansion, and they have all of this wealth and prestige. But Jessica's husband is a notorious, cheater. Her husband, Chester Tate, cheats with everybody. He kind of constantly says it over and over again. I mean, the way he goes about doing it is a constant source of jokes within the series. Like, he's always going behind her back and doing something. And it's done in a very overt and obvious way that just sort of like, And Jessica is always in this eternal state of denial where she just simply refuses to acknowledge that Chester's cheating on her, even though it's like right in front of her face. And so it's like, even though she's a very intelligent woman, she just kind of learns to sort of, play dumb about it and everything like that, and just sort of whatever, tune it out. And so it was really strange to me how much this correlated with the way I kind of not overheard, but I guess you could say I read about in this Medium article here that says, if, of course, Fidel Castro is Justin Trudeau's dad, nobody has debunked anything. And I can read the article. It's by, let me see here. Want to make sure we give these people credit. It's by Karen Leibowitz. And she writes this whole sort of retelling of the history of Margaret and Pierre Trudeau, saying basically that, they were the parents of Justin Trudeau, who's running Canada right now. And so he was basically placed into politics. But if you really review these things critically, you'll know that there's no way in hell that Pierre Trudeau would be the father of Justin Trudeau just by physical appearances alone. I mean, they just didn't even go out of their way even to attempt to blend these two guys' appearances to make one look even remotely like the other guy. So it just appears that he has almost no traces of the father. And so I thought that was kind of interesting, because then when you start reviewing the plot line of Soap, it kind of matches almost like Chester Tate starts to take on, not entirely, guys. I think they have a lot of different people's stories being told within this core series of characters, the Campbells and the Tates. But it's almost like they took the story of Pierre and Margaret Trudeau, the sort of like sleeping around and sort of having that sort of, you know, whatever reputation for getting with a lot of different women, pursuing, you know, Margaret Trudeau when she was 18 and he was much older than her, that kind of thing. All of that sort of fits the model of what's communicated in the plot lines of Soap. There's literally plot lines of Chester Tate, you know, going after like what, you know, like the minister's daughter, you know, in the series, right, and doing it right in front of his wife Jessica, while looking for advice from the minister on how to stop being a cheater. And he's sitting there talking openly with it, saying, "Yes, I cheat constantly. I'm a horrible person. I'll always cheat. Blah blah blah." And, you know, and then a minister is watching as he's like eyeballing the Chester's eyeballing the guy's daughter and everything like that. So it's just the way the plot is kind of lines up to the reputation of Pierre is really weird at times. How they have this sort of correlation, even though, yeah, I mean, this takes place in Connecticut. It has not a huge to do with politics, even though Burt Campbell, one of the characters, runs for sheriff, and that's a political thing or whatever. And they get into talking about how, you know, they kind of create characters out of your persona and things like that, in the fourth season especially. But all right, let's get deeper into this, though, because if you're not familiar with the series Soap, I don't want to babble excessively about it, except to say that, yeah, you have that plot line, right? So again, that's nothing weird in and of itself, guys. I get there's lots of things that involve a philandering husband and cheating around on the wife, and that would have nothing to do necessarily with this. But then you get into the much deeper thing where there's a whole sort of hidden narrative behind how Pierre and Margaret were cozy with Castro and that kind of movement. And there was times where they were known to have spent time with Castro, and that it would correlate to the birth of Justin Trudeau timeline wise. And then there's this whole subplot within the Soap series where Jessica is basically taken hostage by, you know, a communist revolutionary. And as well as an anti-communist revolutionary. There's two different ones, one named El Puerco, the pig, and the other one is, I can't remember his name, but he's of a competing, he's of the communist regime, and he takes Jessica hostage. And in both scenarios, Jessica is completely enamored. She winds up helping them. She winds up either like passing the key to help free one of them and then facilitates the revolution, or houses one of them in her home while they're trying to perform a revolution against the communist nation, or the communists break into her house to kidnap her. I mean, really, it's the plot lines got more and more like strange with the way that for such a bizarre sort of like, it was unnecessarily bizarre considering everything they'd done leading up to then, you know. They'd always had these sort of subplots involving like gangsters and the mafia, and the Campbell's son Danny getting with the mafia and having this whole like forced, you know, marriage and that kind of thing, because of his like debt to a mafioso and things like that. You know, there was all these sort of like strange plot lines that would line up to things that were very, very bizarre. Like you have to ask yourself, where do people come up with these plots? Like, where did they think these things up? Why would they come up with those specific ideas? It's strange, because then I realized when I was looking deeper into Margaret Trudeau that after she had left Pierre, that she did kind of get into filmmaking a little bit. She made 2 films, and when she was an actress, her films were being made the exact same time as Soap was a television series, right? So right around the years that she was active making films and was a lead actress in 2 films was around the late 70s and early 80s, same exact time as the series Soap was in fact getting deep into the plot line involving Jessica Tate sleeping with one of these anti-communist revolutionaries named El Puerco and nearly getting into a marriage with him, and then having all this back and forth plot line with her being kidnapped in either direction. And then the series wound up ending abruptly, guys. So everything that I'm telling you here is relatively safe within the spoilers community, just so you know, if you're bothered by that, because the series never lasted into a 5th season. So everything that I'm telling you is effectively just open plot lines that just don't get resolved, which I thought was very strange. when the series was aired, it tackled a lot of topics that today would be considered nearly, I don't know. It's, it's strange, guys. It's like the 80s and the 70s. It's not like we weren't covering topics that were humane relative to people that had like practiced maybe some different lifestyles, or, I mean, there was definitely some material out there that was, I guess you could say, like sympathetic to the gay community, like Soap was. It had a central gay character, and that's part of why it was so controversial. But it did it in a very politically incorrect way that I think made it sort of like palatable for the average person to sort of be able to say like, okay, at least this is a topic that I can start to face or whatever, if they weren't open to facing the topics before, or they felt, a lot of maybe some hatred inside or something. There's something about the way Soap handled the topic in a very, I guess you could say, decent, politically incorrect, but just sort of also humane way. Billy Crystal played the character Jody Dallas, who's in that. It's not really much to do with it, guys. I'm just telling you, like, that was a big reason why this series wound up getting canceled, was because of this type of thing that I'm telling you about. It wasn't just the gay character. It was just like bizarre plot line after bizarre, more and more controversial, tackling more controversial topics in ways that were very tongue-in-cheek, very humorous, very lighthearted. And it was not something that you would really get insulted by or feel like was malicious in intention. So I thought it was, for the most part, a pretty strong series. I enjoy it still, and I enjoyed it when I was younger. And so I'm thinking that there may be something relative, because I know some of these actors and actresses were in other timeline projects. Katherine Hellman, for example, she worked with Terry Gilliam. Terry Gilliam made Brazil. He made Time Bandits. Katherine Hellman did a lot of interesting projects that not many people that did sitcom work would cross over into doing the kind of strange work that she was doing on the sidelines. And there were other series that were similar, like on ABC, that also crossed over, where these people were doing these very abstract, nearly art film type projects. For example, Herbie Villachez made one called Forbidden Zone with Susan Tyrrell. And Susan Tyrrell, she actually narrates this movie called Wizards. That's, again, a Ralph Bakshi movie. I don't want to get deep into it. Guys, I'm getting really way off topic here, but this is all relevant because it all involves things involving LookingGlass and timeline technology. So what I think has been going on, just to get deep into a little bit deeper into what I'm talking about, I think that there's times where, for whatever reason, maybe how these plot lines get in these people's heads, I don't want to excessively speculate on, but however it works, I do think that there's times where somebody just says, hey, we get information from this, whatever. Maybe they thought they were getting it from a computer. Maybe they were aware they were getting it from, somebody from another timeline, but whatever. That somebody, for example, in 2021 would say they would send information back to the timelines involving the late 70s to like mid 80s. It's one of the areas that I study the most relevant to this exact topic. Information passed back and forth between timelines. As weird as that sounds, guys, but if you're familiar with my material, you'll know that's not too weird for me. I think what goes on is a little bit like the movie Frequency. It's not, I mean, I've used a lot of examples, ladies and gentlemen, with like source code as one example of how timeline and LookingGlass technology actually probably functions at a technology level. But I also think that there's something that's more etheric and anomalous and less predictable that goes on. And it's connected to something that I've heard called silent mind, where there does seem to be, I guess you could say, electromagnetic pathways where people can communicate from timeline to timeline. And whether or not people are receptive to getting that information, I guess, is a whole nother story. But I think it would be a way that people could tangibly pass plot lines for series that would air in the 70s, but they would be getting the information from like 2021. That way, when that time capsule that was designed to drop back in 1977 landed, it's like a double time capsule. It's there for people that like I've already accepted that, yeah, this can happen. And then it's there as like, I guess you could say, as a quote time release time capsule, to where slowly over time, as it goes into syndication and more people see it, that the people who begin to understand what's happening and begin to synchronize with this sort of like Mandela effect thing that's going on, that I do believe there's tangible evidence that is happening because of just the overall manipulation of electromagnetic spectrum and how that references our perception of space and time. you can't interrupt electromagnetic fields without changing the perception of time and space. And that's done through the acceleration of information, if nothing else alone. The ability to get a phone call to you in any environment, that's irrelevant manipulation of space and time. It's a wave that you can actually kind of hop around the normal mechanisms that would require foot-on travel or sending an envelope and writing something down. Well, now electromagnetic frequencies, i.e. wireless phone calls, wireless phones, and wireless data, have now accelerated information transfer to where there's no longer the need. Okay, there's no longer the need for there to be space and time. What am I trying to say? There's no. It's basically facilitated to where there's. It's not that there's no need for space and time, folks. I'm trying to articulate this properly here. That through the advance of information being passed wirelessly specifically, I'm suggesting that that's a space-time manipulation in and of itself that we simply perceive as fast internet, that we simply perceive as phone calls, text messages, etc. It's not that. It goes deeper. All right. Let me get this article up. All right. So again, this is Karen Leibowitz article on medium.com called, of course, Fidel Castro is Justin Trudeau's dad. Nobody has debunked anything. And I'm just going to read it. In the age of sloppy journalism, few authors are sloppier than those who claim they debunked the story that Fidel Castro is Justin Trudeau's biological father. They recite the Canadian government's official travel dates to Cuba and painfully avoid the Trudeau's extensive personal trip to the Caribbean trip in spring 1971. It is a fact that the Trudeaus were in the Caribbean in spring 1971. It is a fact that they adored Castro. It is a fact that the Trudeaus were swingers. That is what you need to know. First, Margaret Trudeau, Pierre Trudeau, and Fidel Castro were all notoriously sexually promiscuous. Margaret Trudeau was a partier who unquestionably had sex with men while married to Pierre. Nobody knows if Pierre objected. They met when he was 48 and she was 18. They got married when he was 53 and she was 23. Their marriage surprised Canada because Pierre had been a lifelong playboy with no wife or children. He'd be turning 60 when she was barely out of her 20s. She publicly states today that she suffered from bipolar disorder and self-control issues. She smuggled drugs in the Prime Minister's official government luggage. She sneaked away from official functions to get high. She partied scantily clad at Studio 54. She became embroiled in a scandal for having sex with Ted Kennedy. According to Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones, Pierre broke up with her while she was having an affair with Ronnie Woods. The list goes on. Pierre Trudeau slept around too. According to a 2009 Globe and Mail article by Margaret Wendt, actress Margot Kidder, Superman 2, classical guitarist Leona Boyd, and actress Kim Cattrall all claim to have slept with him at some point. Pierre Trudeau, biographer John English, states the evidence is overwhelming and that he slept with Barbra Streisand. The record is not immediately clear how much of that happened before the couple was separated, but before she moved out of the house, he was entertaining 3 women downstairs at a time. He often invited 2 girlfriends to the same event. Alan Gottlieb, as ambassador to Washington, complained about one dinner he hosted for Mr. Trudeau because he had 3 girlfriends there. He carried on downstairs, even though Margaret, while separated, was still in residence upstairs. Fidel Castro put them both to shame. His sexual appetite was so legendary, this article cannot efficiently capture it. Suffice it to say, he endeavored to have sex with 2 new women every day and sent aides to fetch them. He fathered 11 acknowledged children, and rumors are he has multiple times that many bastards. Second, the Trudeaus adored Castro. They, their aides, and friends all said so. According to John English's Just Watch Me, The Life of Pierre Elliott Trudeau, 1968 to 2000, they were charmed by Castro and made several trips to embargo-era Cuba just to see him. In 2000, Castro made a rare appearance out of Cuba to attend Pierre's funeral in Canada. On his visit, Margaret welcomed the leader at his hotel on behalf of the Trudeaus. They demonstrated a striking level of familiarity before even getting off the tarmac of their 1976 trip. They all took photographs together. The Trudeaus introduced Castro to their children, and when Castro died, Justin Trudeau was the only leader of the Western world to give him an overwhelmingly positive eulogy without addressing his misdeeds. So there's Margaret with Fidel Castro holding up the baby, holding Michael. There's Margaret Trudeau with both arms around Fidel Castro, still wearing the dress in which they first officially met. Third, the timing is uncanny. This is the part about which debunkers intentionally mislead readers. Justin Trudeau was born on Christmas Day, 1971. In order for his father to be Fidel Castro, his mother would have to be somewhere close to Cuba in March and April 1971. She was. In April 1971, the Trudeaus took a long second honeymoon all around the Caribbean. According to Wikipedia, they visited one island they declined to disclose. It is the only island they did not disclose. And it says here, in 1971, the Trudeaus took a second honeymoon in the Caribbean to Barbados and an unidentified nearby island, then Tobago, then to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, including both Bakia and St. Vincent, with Pierre taking a side trip to Trinidad while Margaret stayed in Tobago. Footnote 19 of the same Wikipedia article cites the April 13th, 1971 article from the Ottawa Journal. The article states the Trudeaus were visiting an unidentified island in the Caribbean and wanted the press to give them privacy. To be clear, they disclosed all the other locations they visited, but asked the press for privacy when they went to the unidentified island. Come on. Justin Trudeau was born 8.5 months later. In 1976, Pierre eagerly became the first NATO leader to travel to Cuba. He brought his wife before even leaving the tarmac. Both Trudeaus were showing an unusual amount of familiarity with Fidel, considering he was a national leader they had just allegedly met. Within hours of their official meeting, Margaret was photographed and intimately touching and holding Fidel Castro with both arms. The Trudeaus announced that they had become besties with the dictator and sang his praises during the height of his human rights violations. Due to his age and lack of previous children, rumors began to spread that Pierre was infertile and that Castro and others were the biological fathers of his children. Perhaps that was unfair at the time, but then Justin Trudeau improbably grew up to look like this. And this. And this. And, I got to tell you guys, as my quick interruption here, the hair patterns are very, very big. When you see common hair patterns, I mean, to me, especially the way the facial hair grows and things like that, those are things to pay attention to, I think, when I've seen common genetics. So, but we're to believe that this would be Justin Trudeau's real dad. This is Pierre Trudeau. Pierre Trudeau has no common facial features with Justin practically, but he shares tons of facial features with Fidel Castro. So again, that's my additions here. Back to her article. So what is all this talk about debunking the claim? It could not be less compelling. 100% of the debunking articles avoid addressing the Caribbean trip altogether. For example, in Vice's article, we investigated those damning rumors about Fidel Castro being Justin Trudeau's real dad, Drew Brown. Brown does not investigate anything. He just mocks the story and then abruptly states this. Oh, wait, Justin was born December 25th, 1971, 9 months after Pierre and Margaret's honeymoon in British Columbia, and long before the couple traveled to Cuba. Dang. I guess you actually can believe everything that semi-professional agitators post on the internet. Not a very impressive argument, Brown. Brown's so-called investigation altogether misses an obvious Wikipedia article showing the Trudeaus were in the Caribbean in spring 1971, with citations to the actual reporters covering it. His uncited claim that Justin was born long before the couple traveled to Cuba is just a recitation of the official dates Trudeau visited in his official capacity as prime minister. He provides no evidence the Trudeaus had never been there before, no evidence that they had not met Castro before, no evidence Castro never traveled to see them in the Caribbean. He altogether avoids the story he claims he disproved and then tries to do a mic drop. Not very impressive at all. All of the articles debunking story follow the same format. They all come from left-leaning websites who sympathize with Trudeau. They all recite the official 1976 travel dates of Pierre Trudeau as prime minister as though that proves they never traveled to or around Cuba on any prior date. They altogether avoid addressing the easily researchable Caribbean trip in spring 71. That is strange for authors who claim to have the truth on their sides. Nothing has been debunked. If anything, the intellectual dishonesty of avoiding the very story makes it more convincing. That is not to say that there are no exaggerations and falsehoods supporting the story, but they are not nearly so avoidant or look so desperate to kill a story. For example, in 2018, internet users spread a rumor that Fidel Castro's recently deceased son, Fidel Angel Castro Diaz Balart Fidelito, announced Justin Trudeau was his half-brother in his suicide note. No major news sources support that claim, and researching it leads to a dead end. Another website gives a devastatingly compelling argument in favor of this story before sabotaging all of its credibility by claiming Margaret Trudeau's family were members of the Illuminati. That is a non-starter for this author. That being said, the exaggerations and painful avoidance of the story's debunkers are far more suspicious. An article written by Alex Kasparek for far leftist fact-checking website Snopes.com declares the story false, but tries to mislead readers about its supporting points. Kasparek omits discussions of the Trudeau spring 1971 vacation and then relies on its own omission to say Margaret could not have absconded from Canada at the time. Okay, but she was not in Canada. Kasparek also suggests Margaret would not have to sneak away from Pierre, but the premise that Pierre objected is not necessary to the story. After all, it could have been Pierre's idea. Kasparek does admit Justin Trudeau had to have been conceived between March 16th and April 22nd. So why avoid addressing that? The Trudeaus within spitting distance of Cuba during that time. Similarly, AP News and affiliates write headlines such as "No, Fidel Castro was not Canada PM Trudeau's father," yet their articles simply recount the improbability of the Diaz-Balart suicide note. Each debunker makes a bold claim and then avoids the very story they claim to debunk. A quick interruption on my own. That's a common tactic. I'm telling you, it's just this like total way of avoiding the core theme of whatever it is. Like they'll say like, no, this is all completely untrue and never actually address it point by point. So kudos to the author for defending their position very well. Perhaps the strangest denial comes from the Canadian government itself. In February 2018, the Diaz-Balart rumor prompted the Canadian government to publicly deny the story. Federal governments and Western civilizations do not deny urban legends. The story clearly got under the skin of someone in Canadian Parliament. Why would anyone in Canadian government be so sensitive to a mere internet rumor? The story is perfectly plausible. Pierre was an aging playboy who had fathered no known offspring despite being sexually promiscuous his whole adult life. Having recently become prime minister, it suited him to get married and demonstrate stability. He evidently wanted a family because that is exactly what he started. Sperm banks rarely existed back then. If an infertile old man wanted to have a family, his wife had to do it the old-fashioned way. Margaret was a 23-year-old wild child who liked doing it the old-fashioned way. She had not finished doing drugs or sowing her wild oats. She was clearly attracted to men in positions of power, even some who were old and unattractive. If Ted Kennedy met her qualifications as sexual partner, Castro was bigger, stronger, thinner, handsomer, and more powerful. From the photos, it seems obvious that she was attracted to him. Today, we might remember Fidel Castro as an old man, but he was one of the most impressive people in the world back then, especially to fellow Marxists like the Trudeaus. He forcefully deposed a brutal dictator with a band of ragtag rebels. He turned Cuba into the Western world's first Marxist country. He beat the Americans in an armed invasion by personally commanding the battle in a tank. He survived CIA coups and assassination attempts. He outlived two Kennedy brothers behind those attempts. He was smart, charming, and funny. He was a 6'3" strong and an athlete who sported the frame of an American football player. He looked like he could beat up any other world leader, much less any competitor for Margaret Trudeau's attention. He was full of bravado, confidence, and masculinity, and smoked cigars like a baller. Why would Pierre Trudeau choose anyone else to be the biological father of his children? There's Pierre Trudeau again. That's Margaret Trudeau. And again, there's Justin compared to Fidel. I mean, it's almost like they're if you ask me, it's almost like one could almost be the other. That's how much they look alike. I mean, I don't think it's even really that much of a question. It's just mixed types of lineage when you really get down to it. Hang on. That was a lot of reading, but without having a sip of coffee. So yeah, it's a compelling argument. And then So I'm not trying to take anything away from this author with my strangeness, guys. And I apologize to the author if they were like, I don't want this kind of attention associated with my article. So really, I'm not trying to do that. Kudos for very good journalism. Yeah, what I do here is I kind of I discuss things that kind of support more abstract narratives, because things that I understand about electromagnetic spectrum relative to our ability to perceive space and time is different than the average person. And I've researched that heavily for years now, not to mention that I have 2 decades of wireless industry experience. And so I'm well aware of all the different ways that electromagnetic spectrum can be used in esoteric ways, not just for communications or just for like what we commonly know as directed energy and things of that nature. There's better uses of it, ladies and gentlemen, relative to the way we perceive brainwave and get intuitive communication, and the things that they understood via Project Stargate, or the Stargate project, I should say, going back into when this series was on, by the way. As far as I can tell, and again, guys, I'm going to get a little bit off into the weird zone now. So again, if that puts you off what I'm about to talk about, I'm just going to let you know. I do have a lot of experience. I'm a pretty smart person. And I have 2 decades of wireless industry experience. I've actually designed cell towers. And what I did back in, I'd say about early 2016, I retired completely from the industry. And I decided to research things involving the more esoteric uses of electromagnetic spectrum, because I had received a lot of information from people that were concerned citizens. And I thought, well, maybe if I take this on as a thing to research and everything like that, it's a little bit like Field of Dreams, right? If you do it in a way that's real and sincere, perhaps build it and they will come. Other people will get interested in things like that and understand that what you do is a little bit different compared to what they've seen before. What do I mean by that? I think that these things aren't discussed seriously. They're discussed in this really kind of ridiculous. Usually when I hear things about LookingGlass, it's, I don't know, it's always like hint, hint, I can do something you can't. And there's not a lot of efforts to explain like how it works, how it could work, what the theory is behind it. And so I don't want to get deep into that topic tonight because I've already done that. But if you just look in the last couple months of my material, you'll see me, especially when I talk about Preston Nichols, you'll see some of my more it's esoteric in nature. It's the information I'm talking about, but it does discuss the way we perceive time. And I think that right now there's so many people that are experiencing some anomalies within their perception of space and time. I've heard way too many reports from people that I consider to be very legitimate, and that I believe their stories, but I don't always have immediate explanations for why they would be getting information, perhaps, or how do I say it, guys? I mean, yeah, I think there's some people that are just like, they're experiencing issues, right? If they're hearing something, then that's that, right? That's not always consistent with a technology thing. But there are technologies like LookingGlass. There's technologies like Silent Mind. There's people that have written books about it, like Dan Sherman wrote his book, Project Destiny, about some of these technologies that involved manipulation of brainwave and intuitive communication. What kind of information can you pass human to human, person to person, or entity to person, person to entity, whether that be machine or otherworldly, wherever that information is coming from. They were doing tests at the NSA with this guy, Dan Sherman. And I've quoted this. I've done some other articles recently about it. He's probably one of the more legit people that I've seen discuss this topic. And I'm only bringing this up because I need more people that, as I get deeper into like the Hollywood connections via timelines and things, I don't do it for like, look, I want people to be entertained and I want them to go like, whoa, I never thought of it that way. Yeah. But I'm not an entertainer, and I'm not doing this for the sake of, subscribers or view counts in the classic sense. Is because when I talk about these topics, I'm sometimes even reluctant to say that I'm connecting a soap, episodes of soap to something as weird as this, but it's kind of how it was done as far as I can tell. And so what I think has gone on is that at some point in time, there are people that do gain access to technology that can do sending packets of information from both human to humans, from one timeline to the other, over, I guess you could say, clairvoyant telepathic methods that are more consistent with not hearing something directly or having a direct vision. It's what I call, and others call, intuitive communication. It's more etheric in nature, where it's almost like you know, like the snap of a finger, and you suddenly understand something, and then you know exactly where to go to get all the supporting information to prove exactly what you just said, or not said, but what you just got informationally, etherically. You have all the necessary links from that, you know, that quick intuition. Boom. Then the download occurs, then you know where to find the rest, and then you know how to assemble it together and put it out there for people. And that's where I think that there's a lot of help that goes on from timeline to timeline. I've experienced such strange phenomenon. Like, for example, I'll get my, just to show you guys, like I'm a person that has actual experience with like radio frequency. And so there's times where I plug like signal generators into devices like this that have antennas inside, where you can send signals, you know, both through your body or through your hands or through different objects after they pass through your body. And I've done things like that experimentally, to where I think that that might explain why I specifically have gotten information in some strange ways in the past. So if you're looking for reasons or explanations, or like, why should I listen to you and not just roll my eyes? That's why. Some of the information I'm going to tell you is a little bit off, but usually if I'm challenged with, you know, like a question, I can explain it to you and whiteboard it in a way that you'll probably understand. You know, this includes some pretty complicated concepts involving how we operate on a frequency level, brain to brain, brain waves and things like that, that I've been studying for about, you know, the last 5 or 6 years pretty heavily. And all right, so on that note, this series, so it was kind of it had like there's like a whole universe of television series like Benson, The Golden Girls. What else spun off from this? Benson specifically was probably one of the larger spinoffs from soap, and that kind of covered political things like a governor's mansion, and, you know, like the guy that serves as, I think, the second in command of the governor or something like that. I can't remember what the exact plot line of Benson was, but Robert Guillaume played a main character on the series Soap, and then he wound up getting a spinoff of his own series because he was such a popular character on Soap. And so, hang on, I need some whatever here. Hang on, coffee. All right. All right, so when season 4 starts showing up here, and sorry about it again, guys, I remind you, a little bit of spoilers. When season 4 arrived, it's basically gets heavy into this whole plot line involving how Jessica Tate, played by Katherine Hellman, has all of these interactions with these communist dictators. And so, again, thinking this through a little bit, it does correlate timeline wise with actual events. If you think about when Margaret and Pierre were meeting, you know, if you read that article we were just on a second ago, let me put it back on here. When you kind of look at some of those timelines, what was it? Yeah, there it is. So there's that. All right. So there's all the, like, around 1971 time frame and everything else like that. And then if you look here where Margaret basically got divorced, you'll see that she got into acting. Let's see, filmography, television. Here we go. While still married to Pierre Trudeau, Margaret Trudeau had a brief acting career, appearing in 2 Canadian-produced films, The Guardian Angel and Kings and Desperate Men, 1978 and 1981. Simultaneously, look at the timeline of when series Soap was on. So you have a plot line that at the time would not have been publicly known. You understand what I'm kind of getting at here? it's not as if everybody in Canada knew what was going on. They weren't all aware, probably almost nobody, if anybody, knew. If now it's hard to find out who else knew that they were potentially meeting with Castro in the Caribbean, just about 8.5, 9 months before Justin Trudeau being born. It's not really common knowledge. And so, if you think about it, if she was kind of getting cozy with the acting community, making movies and television series, there was a lot of crossover between I think the people that did Soap and some of those Canadian produced projects. And Soap does use a lot of avatar technology, is my personal opinion, though I haven't dug that deeply into it to prove that point. But I do think I know some of the actors that played, there's, I think, one or two, I'd say a few characters on Soap that are actually played by a few different people that just do some face masking to do it. It was early forms of it. And I think that's part of the function that Soap served, was that it was another one of these television series that made heavy use of the technology to make that a reality. To the point where I see even the guys like Billy Crystal doing movies with people that would be using the technology. That's all. Again, he made the movie Small Apartments that had James Caan from The Godfather in it too, if you remember. So it's some of these film projects tend to have some of these newer actors and actresses combined with some of these, ones that were more popular in the 70s and 80s. But the thing that I've noticed that they share in common is it seems to be a closely tied network of people that use CGI, computer-generated image face masking, to where one person can have a career as multiple different actors. So in theory, you say you wanted to get actors as people that were younger, maybe you're in your 60s, but you're still good dramatically at playing people that maybe in your 30s. They could have used the masking back then to make you as a 60-year-old into a 30-year-old. Maybe you're a person that just has a really squeaky voice or something like that, but you physically don't look that young. They might have taken a person like that and scaled them down to look like a child or something like that when they were on CGI avatar. And I know most people only think these things exist today and that they're barely used today. No, they existed going way, way back. And when it was the 50s and 60s, they could really only do things that were slight with the face. They would have to use a combination of prosthetics and then making the lenses bend, and so a person's eyes would go from normal to looking like that. The large eye look was big, larger, but making the cheekbones bulge out more, making the face wider. They were all just ways of modifying a person's actual appearance using optical manipulation, and combined with makeup and things like that, the common things that we all know, the tricks that have always been in the movie industry, and they get better at doing. And I do think that they use this on the series Soap, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it was done for malicious purposes or any negative reasons or whatever. It just may have served as disclosure for another timeline. Maybe somebody wanted this information to be found out, I don't know, or maybe it was something that they knew behind the scenes, and they wanted everybody to have once the time got to that, where we were watching it and we would say, wow, maybe that matches to that. I don't know, folks. It doesn't have to be that way, and I'm not suggesting that I would say, though, that if you started watching, if you have seen Soap before and you don't want to go through the whole thing, maybe you could start about halfway into season 4 and just watch the rest of it, and you would know what I'm talking about. Is this whole strange plot line of where these people that normally would never have any interaction with communist dictators, why would that be even a plot line? It's just such a random, outer limits, strange thing they started going into. They started going into alien abductions on this TV series. Yes, they started having things where, for example, one of the characters, Bert, gets taken away by these silver men and brought up into a spaceship, and where you don't perceive time. Time just goes by and by, and you can spend thousands of years up there, but it doesn't even have a blink down on Earth. And how when they take you up into the spaceship, they say they always send a replica of you, and it's one of them. Even weirder, right? That they even have a plot line of that. They clone you basically, and then send down the clone to act like you. And so in the Soap series, they made a joke that the alien hadn't had sex in over 2,000 years. And so when they put him into Bert's character's body, he was jumping up and down, he couldn't wait to have sex, So everywhere he went, he was just he was so happy he was on Earth that he was going, so who's my wife? Where's my wife? Yeah, it's pretty bad, guys. But that's where they go, really. It just gets weirder and weirder and weirder. And the series was already like seasons 1 and 2, they get into regular soap opera weirdness, which is to say that, yeah, like so-and-so sleeps with so-and-so, sleeps with so-and-so, sleeps with so-and-so, while they're also, you know, dating this person, and they're also whatever this person. I mean, yeah, all that is part of the soap plot lines. And I know that that's the ridiculousness of it. That's the humor of it. That part all makes sense. It's just when they start getting into like those other seasons where it's like, it just gets all over the map weird, like super, super freaking weird. Aliens. Anyways. So welcome to the feed, everybody. I've kind of gotten through most of the core material and everything like that. If you're a little bit late, I've just been kind of comparing using this article. Again, if you're late to the feed, I'm using this article that was done, I don't know when it was originally posted. Let's see here. July 15th, 2020 by Karen Leibowitz on medium.com. There's an article link in the description. So, but yeah, it's pretty compelling, you know, when you start doing all the lineups. And I'm just, you know, I do similar types of photo analysis at times where, you know, I kind of wonder sometimes, like if, you know, somebody might have swapped kids at some point or swapped a parent. And I know that happens, and it's sometimes done basically with politicians, especially sometimes to hide the offspring, because, you know, again, there might be malicious intentions. If you were the son or daughter of a popular dictator or a politician or something like that, and people knew it, that could put your family at risk. And so I can understand why there would be certain mechanisms in place to hide that information. But wow, it's a lot to think about. It's a lot to think about. All right. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm happy to take anything as far as that goes. If you have something that's related to the topic, or I guess off topic, I suppose is cool too. I'm just kind of like, this really tripped me out. And you know, if you do some searching, and I guess I don't want to give the link here inside the description because I'm afraid that the link will get taken down, but you can find episodes of soap, you know, you can get them on YouTube if you look carefully enough. Just do some letter swaps and things like that, and you'll find nearly every episode of it. And so what you're looking for would be like the middle to the end of season 4. It just goes all over the map weird. Like season 3 and 4 are both very, very strange. Alien abductions, you know, mafia things, you know, crossing over into like global politics and communists, revolutions, and bringing them into suburban neighborhoods. And it's just a really, really, really strange plotline synchronicities there. All right. And I gotta do some. I keep wondering, you know, what's the end game to all this weirdness? I think that now that I've kind of gotten past the core topic, I'm going to put this back down here for a second and just start going into speech mode. And if you have comments, feel free to chime in or talk or whatever. I'm happy to whatever. But what's the end game to all this weirdness? I think that some of the reasons why these things are kind of put in our faces like this is to remind. I think there's people that are from these other timelines that are trying to remind us constantly that our perceived reality is a space-time chess game of malleable, shiftable parameters. and that the quicker we realize it, the better off we'll be, because we'll begin to understand that what we have to begin doing is focusing on manifesting better realities, manifesting better outcomes, working harder to focus and concentrate and work within the biofield that I talk about and others talk about, that there's a trinity of human energy that we exist within. And that the reason why this weirdness, I think, has begun to become more tangibly real and understandable, and where people can now kind of go, yeah, I get that it's weird, but I mean, something's got to be true. I don't accept the regular truth as true. So maybe some of these weird people, these fringe people, might actually know what they're talking about. And so I'm not trying to associate my data with somebody else's. So kudos to that author. And if they're not cool with my timeline weirdness, then I understand. But I found a lot of compelling evidence that there is a lot of communication going back and forth between timelines beyond just things that I was experiencing going back, for about 5 years, to where I was kind of going, yeah, this is definitely a thing. And that it seems logical that if you're thinking it through a little bit, one of the only ways that you could get this out would be through Hollywood projects, would be through television and film projects, would be through music, would be through all of the standard mediums of communication. And so that all makes sense to me completely, actually. And I don't really, I don't know. I don't really find that hard to believe any longer. I'm really like in a total state of like, yeah, I can accept it and I can believe that part now. I don't accept every piece of information that comes in just because somebody slaps the word LookingGlass on it. Again, there could be manipulation of this information. There could be people that know that this is a pathway that's open, and so they try to taint it. They try to, add bogus information sets to it to where they don't want the truth to come out. And, there would be compelling reasons why that would happen also. All right, and let me think here today, guys. I had more I was going to talk about, but I just didn't put it inside the main topic header because I ran out of notes. But I'm not prepared to talk about the condo. I do have a lot of information about that. But if others had comments on that relevant to some of these things too, feel free to let me know. I'm talking about those who aren't familiar, talking about the condo collapse out there in Florida. I don't even know what that is, Solid. Sorry. Never heard of it. But I can get into deeper on the timeline things and everything like that. One of the things I try to recommend to people, and let me find it. There's this really great series of interviews. I go to my channel here. Hang on. There's this great series of interviews, and I'll put it up on the screen here, and I'll send you guys a link to it. Sorry, I have a lot of these lists. It's hard to find them quickly because they're so jumbled together here. So hang on really quick. Almost there. All right. That's the playlist right there, and I'll put it. I don't know about that. I'm not a person that really studies like Canadian politics or anything like that. This whole Justin Trudeau thing, I found a correlation to that and something else that I was researching it. And since there's all these things going on in Cuba, I thought it'd be relevant to talk about. But, why though, right? Again, folks, so let's get a little bit deeper maybe into the whole Cuban narrative, since to me, that's really kind of where the information is kind of going back to. I thought that it's interesting that they're spinning this in the mainstream media that Cubans are marching on the streets demanding vaccinations and they're demanding like, you know, like I've never even like, are you serious? Like demanding vaccinations and things like that. So, you know, to me, that seems to me like it's a little bit of a red herring that they're marching on the streets asking for vaccinations and demanding that of all things. I think that's a manufactured narrative. I think they're fighting for, I think they're rejecting communism. So I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people that are just pissed off and they just want more things or whatever. But yeah, it looks to me like it's an actual rejection of communism. Um, this is where I think things are getting like really, if you want to have a deeper discussion about, you know, what's going on with our immigration policy and what a lot of these destabilization events are designed to do, and how the media sort of partners with the creation of these sort of mass resonance manipulation events. I think that's why the timeline technology aspect is so compelling to me about why that would be necessary to have, and why they would have to sometimes hide behind ridiculousness in order to achieve it. They would have to have silly television series. They would have to have things that were more comedic. You know, again, I've observed a lot of times, you know, I've observed a lot of times that some of the more relevant data that I get is from some of the more abstract, bizarrely humorous, you know, they seem like they're not doing anything or they don't really have a plot type movies. They oftentimes are just loaded with encryption and information if you're really paying attention. And you're like, wow, everything here is just lining up perfectly right now. It's almost like this was designed as like a spiral loop of information, but it was spit out like instead of a ticker tape that's like really boring to read, it's spooled out into this very entertaining 90-minute long film that, even though it doesn't really make it, like Cannonball Run's a classic example of this. Smokey and the Bandit's a classic example of this. If you study those movies beyond them just being entertainment, you kind of go, you really will ask yourself this. If you just read the screenplays, you're going to eventually ask yourself, who the F wrote this and what were they thinking? What do these lines even mean? I mean, they don't, I mean, they're funny when you're watching the movie because the situations are so silly. If you're into that kind of humor, I think that those Burt Reynolds movies are hilarious myself. I'm actually very entertained by them, even though they seem a little bit dated and, you know, they definitely would be canceled today. They're very politically incorrect. You know, there's just all kinds of weirdness to go on with those movies. But anyways, but yeah, there was a lot of information in them, and I couldn't believe how often I would, like, you know, find something that was going on today just in this ridiculous plot line, and it was perfectly synchronized. And then I looked back into the history of the actors and the producers and the writers and noticed that they were involved with other timeline projects that I had sensed or gotten a similar intuitive communication messaging on. And so, you know, I couldn't help but draw that parallel, you know, that there's got to be something that's going on there. I'm not 100% sold on anything, but yeah. It's just weird to me that they would try to, like, well, it's not weird to me. It actually doesn't surprise me at all, but you know, they're sitting there trying to say like Cubans take the streets demanding COVID supplies and things like that. I'm just like, really? I mean, you know, again, just like anybody here would, I suppose, if you're told that that's what you're angry about and that's what's causing all these problems, and you're going to say, yes, I want the supplies to end this COVID problem. But, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're fighting for vaccinations and fighting for oppression and fighting for people to put something into your arm. I mean, to me, that's just like, really? That's the narrative you're selling? Is it possible that they want revolution, that they want, you know, a free society? I don't know. It doesn't always appeal to everybody, but my belief is that it's probably more to do with just wanting overall freedom, wanting to end their political system. But I think we're seeing that kind of destabilization all across the world. So whatever the governance is, it's COVID just seems to bring out the worst of those things, and people really take to the streets as a result, right? But all right, so back to this Dan Sherman thing here. In case you're wondering, like, what I'm talking about sometimes with the weird things, those unfamiliar with my material, this is just one example. This guy wrote a book, Dan Sherman wrote this book called Project Destiny, where he explains the technology that it basically involves getting information at an intuitive level, manipulation of brainwave, the way that you can tune in yourself to frequency data sets, that he was being trained in a military facility that actually bend like waveforms. They would have him stare at a computer screen and actually like tune his mind into like concentrating on a tone or a waveform and seeing if he could make a modification to it just by focused concentrations, or if he could see like a line start like going like this and then flatten out and go from a flattened out line to one that's going like a sine wave. They had him doing all these kind of experiments like that were concentration exercises. And so the fact that he was former military, that, you know, he wrote this book and he speaks intelligently about it. So I'll put the link inside there above. I'll put it here again. That's Dan Sherman. If you're curious about these types of topics as to what this sort of like weird timeline type thing is, because it's important to remember, folks, that it depends on your perception of how we exist, right? You know, what is time and space? I don't get too weird with it, but I do think that we exist in a universal plasma field, and that it's just simply that it's everything that we exist in that's solid matter is brought into frequency through vibration, you know, frequency, vibration, and energy. And that includes our physical bodies. That includes every building around us. That includes every sidewalk. Everything that we focus and concentrate on is frequency, vibration, and energy, all formed together through collective hive mind, agreeing upon what something is, what it looks like, etc., and then making it into a reality, bringing it into fruition through a shared agreement, which is a shared perception of what that plasma should, I guess, bend and look like. And then we're agreeing upon it at a frequency entrainment level, person to person. We're saying that, yes, that's what that object looks like. And then everyone else believes it, and everyone else believes it. And that's why it is what it is. It's brought into manifestation to these very simple means and methods. All right. Just checking the time, folks. All right. Sorry, there's a really strange vibrating sensation that's going on. It's like going, it's like it's shaking the entire freaking building. Weird how you talk about certain topics and it's almost like, you know, it comes to reality. Like I was actually on Twitter today, I was offering advice to like say, hey, if anybody knows about, you know, wants help discussing things that involve frequency, energy, vibration, and rogue electronic warfare. There was this really interesting article that Cynthia McKinney posted a link to today about something called, I think, Operation Crimson. Where the hell is it? Crimson Mist, yeah. She posted an article. There was like a YouTube clip of this lady reading this article called Operation Crimson Mist, Electronic Slaughter in Rwanda, which is really weird, actually. It's not for any humorous reason, but there was this pun that I was using that involved Rwanda. And it wasn't meant to be whatever, but then I was like, wow, that's a strange correlation. Then this article got posted, which really kind of freaked me out. And basically, it's it shows how there was like this technology that was used in Rwanda to experiment on the population and get the entire groups of people like into an electronic rage. And there's all these different things here showing how basically it just involves like using modulated, amplitude modulated signal delivery to basically aim like a 1 to 3 gigahertz beam, which is more directional and focused like a flashlight at a human target. And then basically, once you do that, you can hit them with the beam that's like 1 to 3 gigahertz, 1 to 3 gigahertz, I apologize, which is 1,000 to 3,000 megahertz. Let me clarify that. So 1 to 3 gigahertz beam, which is correlative to 1,000 to 3,000 megahertz. And then you have to look at it like it's aimed at you like a flashlight, like that beam can entrain on you. And then you just go off, on, off, on, off, on, off, on. As like a carrier method. That's the amplitude modulated signal delivery. And now they can ride another signal on top of the other signal to change your brainwave. And they can do this to large groups of populations. And you can see here from the articles. And this is consistent with what I know about just regular communication microwave. You can apply the same principles to weaponized microwave. True. You can beam something very fine that's in that, 1 to 3 gigahertz range, because a lot of not portable, but like unlicensed microwave dishes for a long time, oftentimes operated in that. There was some 2 to 3, I can't remember exactly where they were. They're in the 2 point something gigahertz range of unlicensed microwave, and there was some that were in the 5 point something gigahertz range of unlicensed microwave. And those were used a lot to do short hops between cell tower to cell tower when I was in the communication industry. So I can just tell you, based on what I know about the principles of those concepts, that everything that you see in this article would be, true as far as like what they could do in theory with it. Now it's just a matter of, would anybody do it? And this is why this is such an infuriating, I guess you could say, discussion to have in so many different circles, because so many anomalies can happen that change people's perception of reality. You can cook human targets, you can vibrate a person out of resonance, you can destroy their DNA, you can just slowly boil them from inside out, lots of things you can do with microwave and things like that to harm a person. But the reason why today, like I got on Twitter, hang on here. Yeah, so here it's Cynthia McKinney says, would they use this technology inside the U.S.? She was watching this thing about how the U.S. Operation Crimson Mist resulted in the murder of 1 million Africans. U.S. aircraft emitting brainwaves, turning rage into murderous frenzy outrage. Congolese and Rwandans should sue the U.S. for genocide and crimes against humanity. Anyways, and so I kind of just offered, I posted a little thing there saying, if anybody, wants somebody to actually talk about these things, like, hang on, not Cynthia McKinney, but hang on, I didn't mean to do that. Yeah, and my reply to this is because any agency can and likely would deny using these types of methods, and we can't approach it from the angle of getting them to admit it. And what we should be doing overall is asking why there is no agency and group directly addressing rogue electronic warfare on U.S. soil as a specialty, because the FBI either plays dumb or is truly clueless. And anyways, just wanted to throw that out there, folks, since I was having a conversation about space-time manipulation relative to these things. Yeah, some strange things tend to go on. So anyway, speaking of Cuba, because that was where the Cuban embassy experienced that whole anomaly, right? So again, what I'm talking about shouldn't surprise anybody. You guys remember that story? Cuban embassy sonic weapon. IEEE actually, wow, this is interesting. I didn't know about this. I'm gonna show you this. Again, it's kind of a debunking article, so I don't know. I'm not going to tell you that I trust it in the classic sense, but I don't want to eliminate this data from my perception. Just to say that, usually people that are IEEE, they tend to be more about, rigid data sets. They don't just immediately go into la la land of conspiracy. Like I've known in my professional industry experience, I actually had a coworker that was IEEE. Would go to the engineering meetings and actually debate and discuss industry standards and things like that. I was like, wow, dude, that takes a lot of dedication. But So in case you're wondering where I'm getting this from, this is from IEEE Spectrum. And so that's just an engineering organization that does international specifications. And so they would be the people that like create a standard about what is Wi-Fi. And then they would say, well, the accepted IEEE standard for what the Wi-Fi bands are this. You call them these letters, these associated bands are assigned to these letters, etc. So anyways, there are groups that do that. But it said the U.S. and Canadian diplomats in Cuba had suffered a host of mysterious ailments. Speculation soon arose that a high-frequency sonic weapon was to blame. Acoustic experts, however, were quick to point out that the unlikeliness of such an attack. Among other things, ultrasonic frequencies from 20 to 200 kilohertz don't propagate well in air and don't cause the ear pain, headache, dizziness, and other symptoms reported in Cuba. Some victims recalled hearing high-pitched sounds, whereas ultrasound is inaudible to humans. The mystery deepened in October when the Associated Press released a 6-second audio clip, reportedly a recording of what U.S. Embassy staff heard. The chirping tones centered around 7 kilohertz were indeed audible, but they didn't suggest any kind of weapon. Looking at a spectral plot of the clip on YouTube, Kevin Fu, a computer scientist at the University of Michigan, noted some unusual ripples. He thought he might know what they meant. Fu's lab specializes in analyzing the cybersecurity of devices connected to the Internet of Things, such as sensors, pacemakers, RFIDs, and autonomous vehicles. That work has taught him that modern electronics often behave in unpredictable ways, and such devices can be manipulated intentionally or inadvertently using carefully crafted acoustic or radio interference. To Fu, the ripples in the spectral readout suggested some kind of interference. He discussed the AP clip with his frequent collaborator, Wen Yuan X Zhu, a professor at Zhejiang University in Hangzhou, China, and her PhD student, Shen Yan. We saw it as an interesting puzzle, says Zhu, who lab works on an embedded security, including the use of ultrasound and radio waves to fool voice recognition systems in self-driving cars. It was a lot of fun to try to solve it. I thought it might be subharmonics, if we recall. A week later, Chen said, no, Kevin, you're wrong, and I just did an experiment to prove it. Yan and Zhu started with a fast Fourier transform of the AP audio, which revealed the signal's exact frequencies and amplitudes. Then, through a series of simulations, Yan showed that an effect known as intermodulation distortion could have produced the AP sound. Intermodulation distortion occurs when two signals having different frequencies combine to produce synthetic signals at the difference, sum, or multiples of the original frequencies. When signal processing equipment behaves in a nonlinear way, it can exhibit this type of distortion. For example, Fu says microphone circuitry can exhibit nonlinear behavior, and waves propagating through the air can also behave in a nonlinear fashion. As acoustic waves containing multiple frequencies travel through a nonlinear system, you can get these bizarre ripples on the spectrum of the signal. At the same time, intermodulation distortion can produce lower frequency signals than the original signals. In other words, inaudible ultrasonic waves going through air can produce audible byproducts. Yan followed up the simulations with lab experiments in which he used two ultrasonic speakers, one emitting a signal at 25 kilohertz and the other at 32 kilohertz. When he crossed the two signals, it produced a telltale high-pitched sound at 7 kilohertz. You understand what's happening there. I've seen this exact effect, you guys, that when you combine these two things, you get another one that's the difference between the two. So 32 minus 25 is 7, right? So 25 kilohertz, 32 kilohertz, what's the difference? 7 kilohertz. Now you have the two speakers producing a third product, which is a 7 kilohertz, whatever, high-pitched sound, the intermod. And the same frequency as in the AP audio. In a nod to the internet meme Rick Rolling, Jan was never able to embed an ultrasonic version of the Rick Astley song Never Gonna Give You Up, which became audible at the point where the two signals were crossed. That's funny, remember that? Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down, never gonna try to desert you. I have to get the lyrics, guys. I'm sorry. I'm just not, I don't intimately know all the Rick Astley songs. I'm sorry. All right, having reverse engineered the AP audio, Fu, Zhu, and Yan then considered what combination of things might have caused the sound at the U.S. Embassy in Cuba. If ultrasound is to blame, then a likely cause was two ultrasonic signals that accidentally interfered with each other, creating an audible side effect. There are existing sources of ultrasound in office environments, such as room occupancy sensors. Maybe there was also an ultrasonic jammer in the room and an ultrasonic transmitter, he suggests. Each device might have been placed there by a different party, completely unaware of the other. One thing the investigation didn't explore was whether the AP audio could have produced a wide range of symptoms, including brain damage that afflicted embassy workers. We know that audible signals can cause pain, but we didn't look at the psychological effects beyond that. At press time, the FBI had yet to announce the results of its investigation. A panel of Cuban scientists and medical doctors, meanwhile, concluded that a collective psychogenic disorder brought on by stress may have been at work. Fidel Adib, a professor at MIT, who specializes in wireless technology for sensing and communications, calls the study by Fu and his colleagues a creative take on what might have happened. Adib, who was involved in the research but reviewed the results, adds that wireless signals can and do interact with one another, and if that happens, you'll hear signals you wouldn't expect to hear. Given all the possible explanations, this definitely seems the most plausible and the most technically feasible. Fu is careful to offer a caveat. Of course, we don't know for certain this was the cause, but bad engineering just seems more likely than a sonic weapon. I don't know. I think that might have what they've been discussing, though, was it might be an apples and orange comparison. I think doing is they're excessively focusing on that one clip as evidence instead of just looking deeper into what happened at the Cuban embassy overall, which has had, you know, other things show up. I don't know, guys. I mean, yeah, Catchy says that they thought that Rick Astley was black until last year. It's funny that you said that, actually, because I don't know where I heard this story, but somebody talked about that they had a discussion with Tina Turner, and that there was a time when back in the 80s when she was like, you know, getting another surge of popularity around the Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome era time, where she was getting a lot of popularity again, and her popularity kind of lined up with Rick Astley's, and I think there was going to be some music event where maybe they're going to be singing together, or one was going to be coming on one after the other. And so she was expecting to meet, you know, Rick Astley at some point in time, and she had envisioned similarly that he was going to be this fairly statuesque, taller, you know, maybe larger, muscular black guy based on the sound of his voice. And it was this kind of short, you know, 50s looking, like, you know, slicked hair. Like he was like Buddy Holly almost, but less geeky and nerdy. I don't know what's a better example, guys. Somebody that's more 50s dreamboat, you know. And then she met him and was like, "What, you're Rick?" It's like, I guess there's something like where they said that this is Rick Astley, and she said, "Where?" or something like that. And he was right in front of her. Like, "Oh, this is his assistant. Where is he? Are you going to show me to Rick Astley?" He's like, "No, I'm Rick Astley." Yeah, he does. He looks like Doogie Howser. It's funny. Not really looks like him, but he's got that syndrome, right? All right. But yeah, there's other operating theories, guys. I mean, that one's new to me. I'd never seen one from IEEE, so I thought that was good to read out, you know, as long as we're talking about these topics. Yeah, so they already talked about how we reverse engineered. I don't know if this is the same theme. Well, hey, folks, you know, if you're curious about this, you know, I think if you're going to develop theories about it, you should expose yourself to both, you know, sets of data. So there's the IEEE article, if you're curious, that I'm showing you there. And again, you know, I usually consider them, look, not everything that IEEE does will be 100%, because, again, I think you're that rigidly, like me personally, I kind of stumbled into being a technician and engineer. I don't have nearly the kind of theoretic knowledge that these guys at IEEE do. These are mostly people that go into college and come out with like master's degrees and PhDs. They'll study one basic concept on something like that most people would not even think about. They'll study it for years and become masters of it and the expert, industry expert. I had a lot of people around me for years that were that level of intelligent. And I got trained by quite a few of them, but I was never on that, you know, on their level kind of thing, where I, like, you know, knew it going back decades and had studied it and had experienced all sorts of different situations and knew how to reverse engineer it. So that obviously also requires a lot of equipment, but I could actually replicate some of these things similarly if I had a little bit more gear and a little bit more testing resources, or was in an environment with folks that had those resources or whatever. So again, I always try to put that out there, that I do look for competent partners when it comes to those types of things. When it comes to doing intelligent research, that's just very, much in the same spirit that IEEE does, but perhaps without the snootiness. Not that they're snooty guys, because I knew some very cool people that partied a lot. They were IEEE. Nice people. But there is a rigid, you must present a document that suggests that you understand the theory rigidly. And I don't function well in those types of environments, and I wouldn't want others to have to be, in an environment that was rigidly like that. But you should give a little bit of credence to what they do, because they do offer a lot of solid engineering principles behind their replication of results. And if you can just read through what they do and at least copy it or mimic what they do, relatively well, it can help you understand how these things work better too. It's good to know the numbers. It's good to know how they're measured. It's good to understand how others are verifying or canceling the various ideas and theories on why it's happening. I was really surprised that there's not more intellectual curiosity when it comes to these types of cases with groups like IEEE. And I think the part that I want to offer this is to the people that are a little bit more suspect of things like this, that I think you're right. There should have been by now more people that are validating the sheer number of cases of actual hacks and manipulation of, of data or of frequency environments that has occurred. I've heard of some really serious cases, guys, like as an engineering, when I was an engineering expert that did like forensic troubleshooting of like problems with cell towers, for example, I was part of a group that went out there and did like deep dive troubleshooting. If there was ever like a cell tower, like a mobile communication tower, for example, I was a system performance engineer for a while that did a lot of baseline drive testing. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Like on steroids. I had like gear in my van, and not van, but truck, SUV, I should say, that had all types of like signal analyzers and phones that would make phone calls all day long and run spectrum analysis on the frequencies all day long everywhere that I went. And then I would return from my trips and I'd sit down at my desk for a day or two, and I would post-process all that data. And then I would lay it out on a map, and it would show me like where every drop call happened, if it did. It would show me where every time where the audio dropped out a little bit, and it would tag it and send warnings to me so that I knew how to go back and fine tune the parameters from tower to tower to find out like, well, did that drop call occur because the towers weren't set up to properly communicate to each other on a software level or on a hardware level? Do I need to tell the technician who's responsible for that cell tower to please go out there and look at statistics or see if there's any alarms on the tower that may be causing problems? Like, that's the type of work that I did for a long time when I wasn't spending several years designing the towers. And I also spent several years doing technical work where I was simply the technician that went out and repaired the hardware, replaced the cards, installed a lot of the base stations or swapped them out that were inside the cell towers, and ran some of the microwave equipment that would communicate from cell tower to cell tower. So when people come up with abstract theories, because I'm a person that did not get a formal education before going into the industry, where I think that sometimes you'll find that I'm more receptive than people like IEEE, is because, yeah, I'm smart enough and I have enough experience to have bumped shoulders with people that are very IEEE in nature, but I would never select to be in a room full of them on a regular basis because I just don't like to be that deep into engineering concepts. I don't find it a pleasurable experience. I don't like waxing semantics and arguing over whether or not I've got the right signal I mean, again, those things are important, but that's for other people. They enjoy doing those things more than me. But it's still like what I offer though is the ability to go in and sort of like do some basic analysis of environments and offer some more fringe, I guess you could say, theories on not even theories, guys, because I don't have theories. I have data that I've collected at location to location in multiple areas where there is a consistent set of data at all of them, and a consistent set of things that occur at all the locations where there's electromagnetic manipulation at a high level. That would include things that can tase people, that can cause them to be sick, that can give people ailments, electrical sensations, things of that nature. And so I'm very talented at researching those things because I've had some pretty immersive environments through which to test my skills in. And those of you that are interested in contracting me, you know, I'm available for online consulting. You can do things like schedule sessions with me. You can check with me for quotes. I do. My price points are kind of up there, folks, just to be honest with you, because I try to filter out the people that aren't serious that way. You know, I used to help a lot of people relative to those types of issues, but I learned that if I don't set a price on it, that I regret it pretty much always. So that's why I say, like, you know, if you'd like to consult with me or anything like that, then yeah, we can have a conversation and I can tell you, like, you know, what it would take to make that a reality. You know, if you just want some basic investigative things or whatever, I can do that. I'm going to be wrapping up here just in a couple minutes, folks. So if you have anything that you wanted to ask before I hop off, that's great. I do want to thank everybody here for joining and, you know, engaging in the conversation and everything like that. I know it was kind of short notice, but, you know, that's weird. Sorry, somebody, I just noticed that my software auto blocked somebody's comment. So it should show up now. So I don't know what happened there. I just got the notification for some strange reason. It popped up before I hit it out. I think it was one of yours, Fred. So it'll show up now. I don't know what happened. It auto stopped it. I'll have to look into what my settings are for that particular thing. But yeah. Anyways, folks, one final thing here. I'm going to try to get to a format where I'm streaming in a more scheduled way, and I have topics that I send out in advance, and, you know, things that I have a lot of things in mind, folks, that I need to bring into more fruition before I get deep into discussing them. But I want to talk about this weird Cuba thing because, you know, aside from just the obvious mainstream media spin on what's going on over there and the way that all these different groups are exploiting it, I oftentimes notice that anytime there's like a big political event like that, it's because there's something that's much more subtle, yet also very, very relevant that they would, you know, seek to hide on the surface. You know, not suggesting that they would destabilize Cuba for this reason, but you never know anymore, folks. It's kind of strange, right? You know, not over Trudeau being Fidel's dad or anything like that, but, you know, it definitely helps that they have a lot of different things going on over there to spin away from that particular data set. And, you know, suddenly there's revolution in Cuba. You know, again, even outside of COVID, it just seems like the timing's really interesting. I think we're going to be learning a lot about what's been done with the Human Genome Project and a lot of eugenics experiments that went on globally all across the world. And I think a lot of people are going to be learning who their real relatives are, finding new siblings they never had, or even parents or aunts and uncles they never knew they had. So wouldn't surprise me at all, folks. Anyways, I really do appreciate everybody joining, and thank you very much, and have a good night.